Hey there. Are you ready to dive into the entire history of humankind with us? I mean, we're talking about condensing millions of years into one, hopefully, fascinating story.
It's going to be quite a ride.
It really is. We're going to be exploring how we transformed from, well, basically insignificant apes to the planet-shaping force we are today.
And what I think is so interesting about taking a deep dive like this is, it's not just about memorizing a bunch of dates and names. It's really about understanding those key turning points in human history and how they still impact us today.
Exactly. So our sources actually start way back, like 2.5 million years ago.
Yeah.
Like when the first humans are thought to have appeared.
Yeah.
But it took a long time to really get the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until something called the cognitive revolution, which happened roughly 70,000 years ago, that things really took off. So Can you unpack that a bit for us? What was the cognitive revolution?
Yeah. Well, in the simplest terms, it's basically when our ancestors started thinking differently. It was the dawn of imagination. It's the ability to believe in things that exist beyond just the physical world. So think, gods, nations, laws, even the concept of money or a company.
Okay.
It's the ability to create and share stories, myths, ideas.
So not just seeing a lion, but imagining a spirit that lives inside the lion and then telling stories about it.
Exactly. And it was those shared beliefs, those imagined realities that allowed sapiens to cooperate in larger numbers than ever before. And being able to work together in that way was a huge game changer.
Yeah, I bet. So instead of just focusing on surviving, they could actually start shaping the world around them.
Precisely. And one really intriguing piece of evidence for this shift comes from an archaeological site in Sunjur, Russia. Archaeologists discovered a burial site dating back 30,000 years. And in one grave, they found a skeleton that was adorned with thousands, and I really mean thousands, of ivory beads. It even had this hat that was decorated with fox teeth.
Wow. Talk about making a statement, right?
Right. And imagine the time and the effort that it was taken to create those beads, each one individually.
Oh, yeah.
It really suggests a level of sophistication, a level of social organization that goes beyond just basic survival. Those beads, they weren't just decorative, they were symbols,
Yeah.
They were stories woven into material form. They suggest things like hierarchy, specialized skills, shared beliefs, all early signs of a complex society.
That's incredible. And it makes you wonder, what were those stories? What did those ancient craftspeople believe about the person they were burying and their world and their place in it? It's just a good reminder that even in the distant past, humans weren't that different from us.
Yeah.
They yearned to make meaning, to connect with something bigger than themselves. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about another game changer.
Okay.
Fire.
Fire.
I think we all kind of know that mastering fire was obviously a huge step for humankind. But our sources revealed some surprising consequences that I honestly never considered.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the impact of fire, it goes way beyond just warmth and protection. When our ancestors started cooking with fire, it actually led to a cascade of changes.
Really?
Yeah. Softer cooked food meant that our ancestors could actually have shorter digestive tracts. And this seemingly small change freed up energy that could then be used to power larger, more complex brains.
So literally more brain power thanks to cooking.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. It makes you think about the saying, we are what we eat, in a whole new light.
It completely changes our understanding of how we evolved into the humans that we are today. And it also, I think, makes that next cup of coffee taste that much better.
Right.
Our ancestors put in a lot of work for us to enjoy it.
So we've got these bigger brains now, thanks to fire.
Yeah.
We're starting to form, more complex social structures. What happens next?
Well, this is where we really start to see the rise of what Yuval Noah Harari calls imagined orders.
Imagined orders.
Yeah, they're basically the invisible structures like nations, laws, economic systems, all these things that shape our lives.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they're not based on some kind of objective reality. It's more like they're based on shared beliefs, stories that we tell ourselves about how the world works or should work.
So kind of like those myths and stories we were talking about earlier, but on a much grander scale.
Exactly. And these imagined orders, they're incredibly powerful. They allow us to cooperate in massive numbers, to build cities, empires, even these global systems that we have today. A great example is, think about the Code of Hammurabi.
Okay, yeah, the Babylonian law code.
Right. From nearly 4,000 years ago. It laid out this very detailed system of justice, but it was all based on social hierarchy. But then fast forward a few millennia to the American Declaration of Independence, and we see a very different imagined order.
Right, one that's proclaiming that all men are created equal.
Exactly. And both of these, they're powerful stories about justice, but they have very different outcomes.
It's so interesting how these imagined orders, these shared beliefs, can both unite and divide us. You know, like we see it again and again throughout history. But going back to, you mentioned it earlier, the agricultural revolution, it seems kind of counterintuitive that something as essential as food production could be considered like a negative turning point.
Right.
What did our sources have to say about that?
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, I think the traditional view of agriculture is that it's all about progress, right? Like humans are finally mastering their environment.
Yeah.
They can ensure a stable food supply. But in reality, it's much more complicated than that. For individuals, the transition to agriculture, which happened around 12,000 years ago, probably meant harder work. They had to deal with new diseases. And if the crops failed, they faced a much greater vulnerability to famine.
It sounds like kind of a raw deal for those early farmers.
Yeah, it probably felt that way. But here's the interesting part. While agriculture might not have been great for individual well-being, it was a game changer at the group level.
So kind of like those ivory beads, like it was a symbol of something much larger than just one person.
Precisely. Agriculture allowed for larger populations, you could have permanent settlements, and it led to the accumulation of surplus food, surplus resources. And this, in turn, led to things like specialization, social hierarchies, and then eventually the first cities, civilizations.
So the abundance of agriculture, even though it had flaws, it was kind of like a trap of our own making at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it would have been almost impossible to go back to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes you think about like the trade-offs our ancestors made, the choices that they faced. More food, but less freedom. More stability, but also more inequality. It really challenges us to think critically about progress, doesn't it? Like, what does it really mean for something to be better? Is it just about, individual happiness? Is it about collective power? Or is it something else entirely?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that still resonates today, especially as we grapple with the consequences of our own technological advancements. But I think maybe we should save that discussion for the last part of our deep dive.
All right, so we went from hunter-gatherers to farmers and from small bands to these complex societies. What were those unifying forces, though, that brought people together on an even grander scale?
Yeah.
What took us from those early civilizations to, the interconnected world that we're living in today?
Well, our sources pointed to three key players: money, empires, and religion.
Okay.
Each of these, in their own way, helped to bridge differences, right? And it helped to create these larger, more interconnected networks of people and ideas.
Okay, let's break those down one by one. What's so special about money? I mean, I think we all like money, but I don't really know that much about it, I guess.
Well, think about it this way. As societies became more complex and they started specializing in different things, the barter system, it just wasn't really cutting it anymore. If you wanted to trade a goat for a pair of shoes, that's fine if you're in a small village. But in a bustling city with thousands of people and all these specialized goods, it gets really complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where money comes in. It emerged as this universal system of exchange, and it was a way to assign value to those goods and services.
Okay.
And it made trade way more efficient. It allowed people to connect over these greater geographic distances.
It's amazing how something that seems so basic to us now was actually completely revolutionary for human interaction back then.
Totally. It literally changed the way people related to each other.
Yeah. What about empires? I mean, I know they were kind of a big deal.
Yeah. So alongside money, we see the rise of empires, these vast political entities. And while they were often pretty brutal, they did play a crucial role in shaping history. Empires imposed a unified political and social structure across these diverse populations. And a great example of this is the Roman Empire. I mean, think about it. It stretched from modern-day Portugal all the way to Iraq.
Oh.
So it brought people from these vastly different cultures all under this one system of law, of currency, of infrastructure.
So even though empires were often built on, things like conquest and oppression, they also created a certain level of interconnection.
Yes, and that's a really important nuance to consider. Empires could definitely be brutal, but they also facilitated trade. They facilitated communication and the exchange of ideas on this unprecedented scale. A good example is the Silk Road. And it wasn't just about silk. It was actually more of a conduit for cultural exchange between the East and West. And it was all made possible by this relative stability and interconnection that empires like the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire created.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got money facilitating trade, empires connecting these vast territories. What about religion? What role did it play in all of this?
Religion often gets overlooked as this unifying force, but it's arguably just as important as money or empires. And that's because it has this unique power to legitimize social structures and provide a sense of shared identity, a shared purpose that transcends individual communities. And the rise of these universal missionary religions like Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism was extremely significant because these religions, they spread far beyond their places of origin, and they created these massive cultural spheres with these shared beliefs, shared practices, and worldviews.
So it's kind of like those shared myths that we were talking about earlier, but again on this global scale.
Exactly. These religions provided a framework for understanding the world and a set of moral guidelines, a sense of belonging, and it resonated with millions and millions of people across different cultures and continents. And let's not forget, those beliefs inspired some of the most impressive feats of architecture, art, and literature in human history.
Yeah, no doubt. It's incredible to think about how these three forces, money, empires, and religion, how they all kind of intertwined to shape the entire course of history. But I want to kind of fast forward a bit to another major turning point.
Yeah, okay.
The scientific revolution.
Okay.
And I feel like when we talk about the scientific revolution, we often focus on the specific discoveries or the inventions that came out of it.
Right.
But our sources highlighted something a little bit different. It was more like a change in mindset,
Yeah, absolutely. The scientific revolution wasn't just about new knowledge. It was about a fundamentally new way of thinking about knowledge. It was about acknowledging the limits of human understanding and embracing the power of doubt.
Okay.
It was about moving away from relying solely on tradition or authority and instead relying on observation, on experimentation, and mathematical reasoning to really try and understand the world around us.
So instead of saying, hey, we already know everything because this ancient text told us so, scientists basically started saying, well, we actually don't know everything, but we can learn more through careful observation and through experimentation.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset, that embrace of not knowing, it was revolutionary. And it really paved the way for all of the incredible scientific advancements that we've seen over, the past few centuries. From understanding the laws of gravity to mapping the human genome. I mean, it's incredible.
But of course, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Always.
Our sources were very clear that the scientific revolution, while it was groundbreaking, also came with some, shall we say, significant downsides.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The scientific revolution really ushered in this era of totally unprecedented progress. We're talking medicine, technology, and in our understanding of the universe. But it also led to some new challenges, I mean, we're now grappling with the consequences of industrialization, climate change, the development of weapons that are capable of, unimaginable destruction. It's like we're living in the future that our ancestors dreamed of, but it's not without its share of problems, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. It really makes you wonder, where do we go from here? What does it even mean to be human in this, globalized, technologically advanced, but also deeply uncertain world? What do you think?
It's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've come such a long way from those early sapiens huddled around their fires, sharing stories and imagining this world beyond their own. We've built these incredible civilizations. We've explored the planet. We've landed on the moon. I mean, come on. We've created these systems of unimaginable complexity. And we've harnessed forces of nature that our ancestors could only dream of. But the most fundamental question of all still remains. What are we going to do with all of this knowledge, with all of this power?
Yeah, it's a question worth pondering, for sure. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the future isn't predetermined, right? It's shaped by the choices that we make, both individually and collectively. So as we kind of look back on this incredible journey from insignificant apes to these complex creatures that we are today, perhaps the most important takeaway is this: the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something that we create.
Well said. That's a great note to end on.
I think so too. It's been so much fun and such a mind-blowing journey exploring the history of humankind with you.
It really has.
Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.